Is this thing on? Testing, testing, testing. Oh, hey, before we jump into this episode, I want to tell you guys how excited I am, number one, to have you, but also to have brand new special guests featuring incredible insights and stories of resilience. Also, do not miss our special Micro Matters episodes. These are short, impactful moments of encouragement designed to support you in your journey of healing from emotional, narcissistic, and spiritual abuse. Whether it's a powerful interview or a quick dose of hope, we're here to remind you your story matters. Thanks again for downloading this episode, and now hope you enjoy today's special broadcast. Welcome back to the Your Story Matters podcast. I'm your host, Branon Dempsey, and welcome again to another episode of the Micro Matters series. Now, it's been a while since I had recorded an episode of the Micro Matters, and what these are micro podcasts that I share my thoughts and my experience on trauma, abuse, and recovery, and also just relate them to daily experiences and how we can work together in solving our past hurts, our pain, and to bring ourselves into the future. No, that sounded kind of weird. Bring ourselves into the present, because we're not talking about like time traveling or anything like that. Anyway, so I thank you for following me here on the podcast. And also, if you watch our videos on YouTube, engage on Facebook, Threads, and now Blue Sky, which is one of our new favorites. I thank you for that. And I want to let you know that I'm coming to you now with a lot more content, as I've been very inspired as what has happened to me about over a week ago. And so be on the lookout for more things that I'll be producing. Also, just want to say a shout out to those that came to the November 7th Breaking Chains Zoom event with David Rublid. It was a lot of fun, and I hope that you can join us on the next event, which we will be posting soon. So, getting back to what happened to me and what's caused a major delay and just changed my life completely. Well, over a week ago, I had suffered a serious accident, a biking accident. And this is a rather strange and comical story in a way. It's also very dangerous, and it came with a lot of pain. So just to let you know, in my background, I've done sports for years. I've ridden bikes, I've run, I played football, I've done a lot of fun things. And I'm also an adrenaline junkie because most, as far as I'm speaking for myself, a trauma survivor, I'm very high up on high adrenaline sports. And I know what I'm doing, and I know that it, kind of helps the serotonin in my brain, and that's why I do it. So anyway, I've been cycling for decades. I love biking, road biking, mountain biking. We live here in Austin, Texas, so there's no short of fun. It's just amazing out here. And if you know anything about the foothills, that's where we live, the winding roads, the up and downs, they are perfect for downhill racing. And that's what I've got myself into for the past 5 years. I have a special bike called a kick bike, which I used to show on my socials and show it off because it's a really cool bike. And I have a lot of fun with it. And that's for downhill racing. Well, the accident that I had was definitely something that was beyond my control. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because it has a lot to do with our sense, balance, our understanding of our own trauma, because that too is out of our control. And so, as I will now tell you what happened to me to relate this experience, I was setting out on a day of, the schedule was great. I had my work in front of me. I started my job early that day, and I decided, well, now I'm going to go ahead and take a break, and I'm going to go for a ride. And only about 6-7 miles is what I do daily to have good exercise. And so I went through my normal route, and then I realized that, hey, I got some things going on at work. So I decided to actually cut my ride short for the day, and I decided to head back home to prepare. And as I did, I'm going through the normal roads that I know, very familiar. I'm wearing all my protective gear, and I'm very safe at what I do. But downhill racing, if you know anything about it, it's actually quite dangerous. And so, like, you can clock speeds anywhere between 30 to 50 miles an hour. Now, my average speed, top speed, is about ranges between 40 and 46. And so I know it's crazy, but again, I'm an adrenaline junkie, and it just helps my level of serotonin release. So, but I've had a lot of fun with it. But regrettably, this would be the last day that I would partake in this favorite sport. I will ride again, and will do a kick bike ride again, but not to this extent. And so what happened? Well, simply this, and it's even embarrassing just to even talk about it, you guys. So I'm going down a hill. It's very familiar. And then I see a flock of deer that begin to cross the road. So I see it ahead of time. I slow down, and I just figured, you know what? I can avoid it. I can slow down. I'll be okay. I stayed focused on the road. You always respect the road, respect your surroundings. And that's what I was doing. As I was approaching the deer, and if you know anything about deer, they're lovely animals, but they just do not think. And they're highly unpredictable. So as the flock was crossing the road, they split themselves to a right and left side. And I figured, I can just go down through the middle. Big mistake. As I approached the deer, I, out of nowhere, saw this one doe to my right. She ran almost in front of me. She stopped and hesitated. Now, at that point, of course, the familiar wheels of time stop. Like, no, my life was not flashing before my eyes, but everything did happen in slow motion. And I just thought, well, if I just figure out where she's going, I can consider my other options of escape, right? Well, my options were very limited at that point. I was going around a curve, and I knew that I had to be very precise in where I was going in the respect of other traffic on the road, of rocks on the other side of the road. There was a portion of another hill that I had to be careful of because I didn't want to fly over the hill on this one road. So all the activity that was taking place of the deer was happening majorly on the right. So as I was considering all these options going at 1,000 miles per second in my head, the deer decides at this point to re-engage its path, and to my surprise, which I thought it would actually run towards me, it didn't. It actually ran alongside of me, and then it decided to barrel me into the left, which trampled me and my bike, pushing me to my left side. All the weight of my body and my bike was, it was delivered into my elbow. So my elbow took all the impact of all the weight. I smashed my elbow in the road. I knew immediately I broke the elbow. I just didn't know how I did it, as far as, like where it was and if there was any other extremities. So I did a body tuck, because they teach you how to do this when you're, riding fast or mountain biking. You kind of do a tuck with all your appendages, so that way you don't have any outlining a straight arm or a straight hand that's just going to go flying in the air, and then you're definitely going to be into some serious hurt. So I did all the right things by falling. I had my helmet on, all the protective gear. It was a good thing because I didn't hit my head, my neck, my back was fine. All of my other arm, that is, and my two legs were fine as well. So as I hit the deer and fall to my side, I'm rolling down, sliding down now the hill, going at about 34 miles an hour, and which is still fast enough. I knocked the deer over. The deer went ahead and went on its way into the woods. And there I am, still sliding the whole time, freaking out. And it's like, I'm scared at this point, because it's not so much hitting the deer, but I was scared because I couldn't stop. And I didn't have the ability to navigate where I wanted my body to go. It just kept sliding. And I was also afraid that I was going to go off the cliff on the other side of the road where there's nothing but a rock bed down below. So yeah, very scary scenario. And it was a good thing, actually, that I did hit the deer, even though I felt so sorry and so bad. But the deer took my weight, because if it had if it had not been for that animal, I clearly would have I clearly would have gone on the other side of the road. There's no telling what extremities and injuries would have happened. So anyway, I stopped at the bottom of the hill, and a neighbor came out, and he ran to my direction, and he said to me, "Hey, I heard the crash." And I'm like thinking, what? He goes, "Yeah, I heard the crash from inside my office. And I came out and I saw you sliding down the hill, and I saw the deer taking off." And I had to laugh, because it just sounded so funny, and the doctor said this later when I got to the emergency room. He was like, some people when they go hunting for a deer, they may use a firearm, but for you decided to use, so that was like the laughing stock of the hospital floor on that lovely Tuesday morning. And so, yeah, it was funny the way it happened, because normally you don't hear about a bicyclist encountering a deer and getting injured. Now, maybe you have, it's very rare, but usually you hear about car episodes, right? Well, this is a bike episode. So it was just so strange the way everything unfolded. But I will tell you that I got to my feet. I was shaking. I was checking myself very slowly to make sure that I could breathe. My neck was okay. And the neighbor who came out was helping me up, got my bike and everything. And then, of course, I made my way to the emergency room where I met my wife, and Grandpa actually helped me all the way to the ER. And so, yeah, it was quite the life-changing experience. And the doctor even said, "Hey, if you're going to break any part of your arm, that would be the one to do it." And it's the ball socket of my elbow. And basically, I smashed it into about 7 or 8 pieces. So he called me Humpty Dumpty. And when you look at the x-rays, you see why. Now, as I'm making this recording right now, of course, this is post-surgery. So I've already had the incisions being done, and they reconstructed my elbow. And so my big, huge thanks to the medical staff and my neighbor who helped me that day. Of course, my wife and my family, because, wow, things could have changed more rapidly, more dangerously, and they had not. So I'm coming to you very humbly. I'm very contrite and very sober, because I know, I'm very well aware, I could not be here speaking to you. And the fact that I am, it's a miracle. And I know who's in charge, and I know that God was the one protecting me, and I can't explain why or how, but I will tell you that I'm grateful for everything. And so this is where I want to bridge the gap into how we work with our trauma, and how do we really understand things that happen to us without reason, without control, and it immobilizes us in life. And then how do we get through it? How do we even begin recovery and growth and healing from our own injuries, whether it's physical, verbal, mental, spiritual? And I've had all that since I was 6 years old. So I'm still picking up the broken pieces. But I will tell you, it does get, I won't say ever easier, it just gets better. So I wrote this piece on Substack, and you can find it there. And it's called "The Silence Reclaiming Your Voice from Trauma." And so the thing about trauma is that it runs deep. It impacts the brain, the body. It immobilizes our emotions. And as survivors, the pain can linger for years, and it whispers to us lies that say, "You're unworthy," or "You're broken." But I will tell you, my friends, there is hope. And I've used to be, and I still am, a very huge proponent of talking out your healing, talking out your trauma, because that way, the more you speak about it, the less it controls you. And that is so true. But I will also say this, that talking alone doesn't erase the trauma. Again, like I mentioned, picking up the pieces, you get better at it. the unspeakable trauma of sexual abuse, as well as emotional, physical, and spiritual. And at that time, I lived in a home that was marked by narcissistic abuse from two sets of narcissistic parents and families who were supposed to protect me, but instead they exchanged my safety and nurturing for fear and shame with nowhere to turn. My family's dynamic, it only deepens the wounds. So you can imagine going through something that's miserable as trauma itself and abuse. But when you have the dynamics of emotions that re-insulate that abuse, it just makes it 10 times worse. And for me, I didn't know how to break that cycle or how to break that mold. So what I've learned is that through all my life, I thought that my parents were doing me favors, but instead they were trying to silence me with blame. And instead of trying to make me feel special, they made me feel miserable. And so even when it comes to dealing with the trauma and speaking about my pain and telling the truth to them was a form of betrayal, because now I'm breaking their rules by talking, right? And this is exactly what abusers do when they silence their victims. So my hurt became their tool as a means to control me and invalidate my feelings and my experiences. And this is where we get into talking about the word shame. And why I pause is because shame is such a heavy word. It's suffocating. And I've learned early on to hide my pain and to bury that deep so that no one else could see it. And that if I just believed the lies, it was a way to survive. See, that's how you play the game. But this silence didn't protect me. All it did was imprison me. The weight of carrying my trauma alone pushed me into isolation, self-doubt, a distorted sense of worth. And I began to believe that lies I was told, that my voice just didn't matter, that I was broken beyond repair, and that I was somehow to blame, even for my own abuse. Did you know that even my own mother accused me for my own abuse, saying that it was my fault, even just recently? Yeah. And so I'm just being real with you because that's what this podcast is for. So, wow, as I think about all that, so how do we break free from the false narratives in our lives? It's not easy. And I think it's like a continual breaking of the false narratives. I don't think it's like a one and done thing where your emotions are like a light switch. You just shut them off when you want to. Well, there actually is truth that you can do that. It's not healthy either. It's called compartmentalization. And at times we use it as a self-defense mechanism, which is great. But when we begin to shut off parts of our lives that are unwanted or ugly, it's another form of burying that pain, which makes it even more difficult to embrace and to later heal. So confronting my parents about my abuse was just another mountain that I had to climb. And even to this day, I've decided that there are just things about my life that I don't need to share for healing. And that's okay. And that's hard. Even going back to the conversation that I just mentioned about with my mom. There are just some things, details that you're not obligated to give to the other person, especially if they're not safe, especially if they are a quote unquote trusted family member. You don't have to divulge anything that you don't want to. And it doesn't mean that you don't love them by withholding information. It doesn't mean that you are betraying them. They may say that you are. They may want to paint the picture and as they play the martyr and the victim. Well, that's just a typical narcissistic character right there, right? But for me, I had to learn that over time, that my voice really did, and it still does, has power. And that's why today I speak out on it, because did you know that every time when you speak, that you're breaking the silence and that your voice grows stronger each day? And I know it didn't start that out way for me, but the thing about it is that pain thrives in secrecy, but healing begins when we name what's happened, when we begin to name our truth. And then there's a liberty, there's an ownership in that. Because see, no one else can own my trauma but me. No one else can own my abuse but me. I'm not making myself responsible. I'm just owning the fact that this occurred to me, and I can't blame anybody else. I can blame the abuser, yes, absolutely, because they were the ones, they were the perpetrators, they were at fault, they caused the abuse. But what I'm saying is that I cannot allow myself to blame other people that do not have any association with my trauma. Does that make sense? So if you've experienced abuse or trauma, you know what I'm talking about. You know that your pain is also valid. And this is why I say so often in my videos and articles and posts that your story matters, because it truly does. And what I've learned is that you don't have to carry it alone. Because see, healing is messy. It's nonlinear, but it's possible. And shame loses its death grip when we bring our pain into the light. And while the journey it may feel overwhelming, but know this, you are worthy of that freedom. You're worthy of achieving peace that comes with healing. And so the reason why I, am tying the story into even my own accident is because breaking free from the shame is the power of healing trauma. I'll say that again. Breaking free from the shame is the power of healing from trauma. Because here's the deal, guys. Ignoring your story, when you ignore your story, it only gives shame power. It convinces you to stay quiet, telling your pain is too much, or your story is too messy, or your wounds are unworthy of attention. And silence does not erase trauma. Let me say that again. Silence, no matter how quiet you want to be about your hurt, does not erase, because by not talking about it just doesn't go away, your trauma, your injury, your hurt, your pain. Silence doesn't erase trauma. It doesn't make it go away. It's like when we were kids, we close our eyes and imagine that other person's not there or that event. That's a survival tactic. And yet, as kids, we believe that. Like, well, if I just close my eyes and believe real hard enough, it'll go away. Well, we do the same thing into our adult years because that's what trauma does. And it's supposed to keep you stuck in that fear and self-doubt. So this is why being vulnerable with our pain and acknowledging the things that have happened to us and putting a label on it is so essential for our healing. Because each word that we speak and hear is a step toward freedom. Speaking out declares, I am more than my pain. So here are some steps that have helped me in breaking the silence and reclaiming my voice. Understanding this, that number one, healing is a process. And so is learning how to talk. Number two, trauma-informed therapy helps you process emotions. I used to think that therapy was just about laying on a bench or a couch in front of a psychiatrist and talking about all the pain that happened from your mother. Well, that happens too. But it's not about telling stories. It's not about, revisiting things to talk about you as some form of a pity party. No, talking about your trauma, it's to process all the events and the emotions that you experienced as a child that you still can't put words to as an adult. Do you see that? Because when you are a child and when you incur trauma, our childhood brains are not capable of harnessing cognitive thought or to have a resolve as the way an adult would by processing those events in a mature manner and to say, oh, well, that's what's happened to me and that's why I feel this way and this is why I have these sorts of experiences in my life because I've made these sort of... We don't talk that way. We don't have that capacity as children. And this is why silence is so common because, number one, you're already shell-shocked about the abuse. Number two, you're told not to speak about it. And number three, you have the inability to process it as a child in the first place. Number three, putting a label on your emotions gives you power over them. Let me say that again. That is so cool. Putting a label on your emotions gives you power over them. So if I'm going to say that I'm disgusted at what happened to me, it gives me power because it's liberating to look at something so ugly in my past and say, you know what, that is disgusting. It's not the excused item anymore of, oh, that was just the way that my brother or so-and-so family or my dad or whoever, that's just the way that they behaved. No, it's a lot more than that. When we learn to tell the truth and we learn how to put a label on things, we're no longer sugarcoating the reality for what it really is. So it's not just he put his hand there that one time and he was just trying to be friendly. No, he put his hand there because he was trying to abuse me. Or they were speaking these kind of words to me because they were trying to manipulate me to do something that was against my will. Let's see, number 4, is it? Naming your shame unpacks the burden of guilt. So now if I can name why I feel so bad about what happened in my experience, it lessens the load of that guilt. I no longer have to wonder or worry about why do I feel so bad? And I think that's a huge problem for all of us, for all survivors, is that we go through all life not having the ability to explain our own pain as to why something hurts so much. It's like things like this. Like, why do I get that funny feeling in my stomach every time when the phone rings and I see my dad's name flash up on my phone? Or that funny feeling that I get every time when we go over for Christmas. Or I tend to leave the room and kind of shake a little bit when so-and-so enters the room. See, there's a reason why you react and respond, your body actually is. There's a reason why those things take place. So I'm just going to wrap it up here. This is about learning how to break the silence, learning how to name things, learning how to treat ourselves with kindness, because kindness is a powerful antidote to our shame. And for trauma survivors, this is incredibly helpful because trauma already leaves us feeling powerless, but shame, if we allow it, it adds to it. It adds to this, telling us that we're responsible for something that we're not. So by breaking the cycle, talking about our trauma helps do that. Speaking out our challenges, speaking out against the secrecy that shame tries to imprisonate. And whether it's with therapy or a friend, through journaling or expressing your story, talking about it really does heal. So reclaim your voice, my friends, because you are not your trauma or your shame. You are worthy of healing, worthy of being valued. The more you speak, the more you shatter that mold and reclaim your life, because your story matters. Hey guys, thanks again for joining me here. This was a very long Micro Matters podcast, but thank you for joining in. Remember, hit the subscribe button. If you like it, drop me a comment. Let me know what's going on. And until then, I'll see you next time. Remember, your story matters.